Funding for Schaefer-Ellis is provided by Skillshare, the sponsor of today's video. Hey gamers, this is part 3 of a 6-part BoJack Horseman retrospective that I'm doing with Space Tree Studios. If you haven't already, check out our videos on seasons 1 and 2.
After spending the last 2 seasons establishing the characters and giving BoJack his Hollywood comeback with his memoir and the production of his dream movie, Season 3 sets its sights on the Oscar race, having BoJack and those involved with the film's production tour the country, marketing the movie, and trying to sway the Academy to nominate Secretariat for an Oscar. This is a natural build from the last 2 seasons and a good conclusion to the arc the show has been telling up until now. Seasons 1 through 3 feel like one whole complete story, with Season 1 being his rise from the ashes, while 2 and 3 feature all the trials and tribulations that go with being a big hotshot movie star. I asked James if we can make an argument that it follows the hero's journey, but he said no and called me names. F you.
It's a great direction for the story to be going because an Oscar is generally seen as the most prestigious award in the entertainment industry. It's the ultimate prize that any entertainer strives to achieve, and as such, BoJack ascribes this profound sense of meaning to getting an Oscar nomination. He keeps telling himself throughout this season that if he gets an Oscar, he'll finally be fulfilled. His life will finally have meant something. And yet, there's this uneasiness present whenever he expresses this idea, because we know and he knows deep down that an Oscar nomination isn't gonna fix the hole in his heart. It's not gonna magically make him happy for the rest of his life. But for now, he has to cling to the idea that it will and chase that Oscar goal throughout the season.
That being said, I would just like to question something. In Season 2, they make a point of showing that upon firing Kelsey, the new director basically ruined the movie and turned it into a lighthearted family film, which I have a feeling is not the kind of movie that typically gets Oscar buzz. Hey James, you think Jumanji 2 would qualify for Best Picture?
No.
You're sure?
Yes, I have watched every Oscar movie ever, and Jumanji 2 doesn't come anywhere close to Adam Driver accidentally stabbing himself while getting a divorce.
Do you watch any other movies besides Oscars and Disney?
I watched Shark Tale.
And this could be part of the joke, but they don't really do anything with this or bring it up ever again. So I feel like they just kind of forgot what kind of movie they made and hope we didn't notice. Sonic the Hedgehog for Best Picture 2021.
Anyway, the first episode of the season is very introductory. It establishes a lot of the new roles the characters will fill this season. BoJack is on the Oscar campaign trail with the help of his publicist, Anna Spanakopita, one of the most underrated side characters in the entire show, honestly. She's fast-talking and wildly entertaining in every episode she's in. Mr. Peanut Butter is done finding out what Hollywood stars and celebrities know and if they know things, so he kidnaps his accountant in order to get some wacky ideas on what to do this season. And his accountant mocks him and Todd by making the sort of dumb idea those two would usually come up with. A TV show about a spaghetti strainer that's also a hat. To be fair, I'd watch that over Big Mouth.
Big Mouth, bitch.
So Mr. Peanut Butter orders a bunch of spaghetti strainers, but forgets why he ordered them a few episodes later. He insists, however, that the eventual payoff will be huge. It better be. Diane is ghost tweeting for celebrities at Princess Carolyn's new agency, and oh yeah, PC has a new agency. I should probably talk about that. William, talk about that.
Yeah, so since James was big dumb last time and didn't acknowledge her existence at all, her entire story arc last season was trying to break away from Vigor and start her own agency with Ben Schwartz. Shenanigans ensue, and she and Sonic break up, and she goes ahead and forms Vim on her own terms. And with this new agency comes the arrival of the best character in the show. Guys, gals, and non-binary pals, give it up for the one and only Judah.
Enough.
Judah is truly
Incredible!
I absolutely love his subtle quirkiness, deadpan delivery, and incredible devotion to his job. He's an absolute delight to have around, and he's exactly the kind of devoted person PC needs in her crazy life right now.
His monotone and slightly robotic demeanor is a great contrast to the high-strung goofball antics PC and the rest of the cast get into. Judah provides stability to her life, which, considering what all is going to happen this season and beyond, she absolutely needs someone stable in her life to make sure her fledgling agency doesn't go bankrupt before its first film.
Overall, this episode is a solid enough starting point. I also really like Todd saying he'll get into a ton of shenanigans in NYC, only to get lost in the hotel and never make it out of there. That's what we in the industry like to call subverting expectations done right, baby.
Can you shut up about Star Wars for 5 minutes?
What? I was referencing Shark Tale, which subverted subverted my expectations by having fish eat sushi.
Okay, well, anyway, BoJack and Anna begin to conduct interviews to drive up hype for Secretariat. BoJack pulls a BoJack and becomes exceedingly hard to work with after a while because, gosh darn it, why doesn't anyone like my 90s sitcom anymore? But he keeps going and hits it off with one reporter and has a one-night stand with her. He then fucks up and tells her that he's been entirely replaced with a CG horse, and she records that on a tape. Fortunately, Anna covers it up and gets the recording back, and we don't hear about it ever again. Nope, not at all.
Episode 2 is all about 2007, baby! It's a flashback where we get to see what the gang was up to all those years ago. It seems random to do a period piece on such an oddly specific and recent year, but this episode quickly justifies its existence for a number of reasons. First, all the non-stop wacky 2007 jokes. Seriously, every other line of dialogue in this episode is either a reference to something that was relevant in 07, or some sort of line that's ironic in hindsight given what we know about these characters in the present day. I'm not gonna lie, eventually it does get exhaustive, but it's also kind of admirable just how rapid fire these jokes are. And yes, there is Jerry Seinfeld in a bee costume for all you bee movie aficionados out there. Congratulations. Where this episode really shines, however, is with its characters. Right off the bat, we see that while all the other main characters have different clothes and hairstyles and overall looks, BoJack looks the exact same in 07 as he does in the current day. This is a fantastic touch because it shows how his life hasn't really gone anywhere since Horsing Around ended. There's no reason for him to change his look or really anything about his life. He's stuck in this prison of self-loathing and there's nothing that'll break him out of it, except maybe a new TV show, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
You guys ever think about how the early 2000s and late 2000s are like two different decades? Like, the first half was just the 90s too, and the second half was 2010 beginnings. You show someone a sitcom from 2001, and it's nothing like how they'd be in 2007. Like BoJack Cuddly Whiskers' new project. Yes, we get introduced to successful TV producer Cuddly Whiskers, and they set out to make their own Big Bang Theory level success. And spoiler, it works. The network loves what they came up with. They love it too much. So BoJack pulls a BoJack and makes the show all about him, and oops, just like the Geico caveman, the BoJack Horseman show airs for a few episodes and is shortly canceled and falls into obscurity, and BoJack falls with it.
It's fascinating to see BoJack try and sabotage his own success, since at this point, he's exclusively known for horsing around, and he wants to distance himself from doing another schmaltzy, wholesome show, only to realize his mistake when Princess Cailin, one of the only consistent people in his life, tells him that she loved the horse and horsing around, and it's a fine legacy to have. It's a nice moment for their relationship, and a sad moment if you had any hopes that BoJack would turn his life around with this new show. Of course, this is a prequel episode, so you knew that wasn't gonna happen going in, but I digress. The other characters do stuff too. Mr. Peanut Bobber is unhappily married to Jessica Biel, and he meets Diane for the first time, who's working at Starbucks. And I think it's really interesting that right from their first real conversation, Mr. Peanut Butter gets Diane's name wrong, calling her Diana instead. That really says a lot. Right from the start, he was never really listening. Todd is also seen as a young lad who seems really uncomfortable with having sex. Interesting. Wonder where that's leading. He also destroys the ending of The Sopranos, which is probably my favorite 2007 related joke from this episode. Woke up this morning, broke the ending of the Sopranos television series while shimmying out a window. Finally, Princess Cailin's story is easily the most depressing out of everyone's in this episode. We see how she managed to become an agent. Basically, she's an assistant to this old guy agent, who bemoans the fact that he wasted his entire life doing this job and was never able to start a family. And PC doesn't heed this warning whatsoever. She's just excited to take over his job. It's pretty grim considering the position she's in the present day.
Here she makes some of the same mistakes she'll make later in life for the first time, mostly involving BoJack, including the first of many one-night stands. 2007 truly was a landmark year. Thanks, Kesha.
Episode 3 is a murder mystery where BoJack and Diane find a dead stripper in Cuddly Whiskers' pool and tie it back to a special brand of heroin named after BoJack, entitled BoJack Kills. Is that a metaphor or something? Probably not, right?
Also, the brand originates from the dude who played Goober in Horsing Around, and he also owned SeaWorld and turned it into a strip club. This would in no way ever happen in real life except maybe the Orlando version. Go home to Florida, Goober.
BoJack and Diane eventually find the missing Cuddly Whiskers, and the ending of this episode is especially effective due to what a fantastic foil Cuddly Whiskers is for BoJack and Diane. Diane tells Cuddly Whiskers that he can't just disappear, and that doing so hurt a lot of people, like the dead stripper who had an addiction problem and came to Cuddly Whiskers for help. Cuddly Whiskers, however, insists that it's more important to take responsibility for his own happiness, and that it doesn't matter that he left everyone and everything behind. All that matters is that he's happy now. BoJack and Diane don't take this advice well, and why would they? They both did exactly what Cuddly Whiskers did last season. They were overwhelmed with their responsibilities and they were tired of running in circles, so they left it all behind. Diane left Cordovia and her own marriage, and BoJack left the tar pit of LA to stay with Charlotte's family. As it turned out, leaving everything behind didn't make either of them happy in the end. Diane remained miserable throughout her tenure at BoJack's house, and BoJack pushed too hard with Charlotte and had to leave. The problem for BoJack wasn't the tar pit he was trying to escape from. It's him. So after these two tried and failed to give everything up in their pursuit of happiness, it's no wonder that they don't believe in what Cuddly Whiskers is telling them. It's no wonder Diane's last line in the episode is,
I just want to go home.
Back to her crumbling marriage. Because where else can she go? What else could possibly make her happy? Now it's time for episode 4, and I'm not really sure what I can say about Fish Out of Water that hasn't already been said. It's genuinely a work of art, perfectly charming in its simplicity, yet rich in its underlying themes. You get so invested in this dialogueless story about BoJack helping this seahorse dad give birth, then realizing the dad left one of his kids behind, and helping to get this kid back to his family. Like, it's such a rare instance of BoJack doing something genuine and kind, and it has excellent, expressive, well-storyboarded animation to boot. I remember Raphael Bob Waksberg talking about his influences for the show, one of which was Pixar Animation Studios. He said that he admired the way the studio wasn't afraid to play with structure and try different things, like the dialogueless first half of WALL-E. You can easily see that influence in this episode.
Meanwhile, at the beginning and end of the episode, BoJack runs into Kelsey trying to advertise her new independent film, and BoJack struggles the whole time trying to think of something to say to her, but has severe difficulty trying to communicate his feelings to her. Very fitting considering how the entire episode is essentially silent, save for the intro and ending gag.
Oh, you have got to be kidding.
He is able to communicate to us, the audience, through his actions and expression, but can't communicate with the people in his life that matter, whether through his own problems or external factors like all the encompassing pressure of the ocean.
Episode 5 is fairly simple. BoJack meets Todd's old friend Emily, who we saw in the 2007 episode, and he still doesn't want to have sex with her. Again, interesting. What could this mean? As my favorite game show host once said, let's find out. In a later episode though, not this one. This episode does have something raw and really sad to say about how BoJack sees relationships though. He accidentally breaks up a couple that's about to get married since he expresses how it's great when a couple completes each other. This instills a bit of doubt in one of the brides, who asks if they really do complete each other. BoJack has to talk her back into getting married by saying that it doesn't matter and she should just settle for someone she kinda likes in order to not end up alone in the end. Because BoJack realized that everybody loves him, but nobody likes him. And that is the loneliest feeling in the world. While BoJack is far from someone you should trust to give romantic advice, this quote really rings true and it's stuck with me for a while. You'd think that being loved by a ton of people you don't know personally is enough to make you feel less alone, but it really isn't. They don't know the real you and you're constantly worried that if they did, they wouldn't like you at all anymore. You think this admiration from afar will make you feel happy and fulfilled, and when it doesn't, you feel more alone than you would if all these people didn't know about you. There's a whole lot of truth to this line, and that's what makes it hurt all the more. Also, Diane is pregnant. Okay, let me back up. She did drugs at a party she was accidentally invited to, and she broke her wrist, and Dr. Pig told her she's pregnant.
I diagnose you with Babby. Speaking of Babby, PC want Babby, right? What's she up to? Well, Judah, in a wacky miscommunication, sets her up with 3 blind dates. One which is a boring dude who only cares about work, and the second is the world's only albino rhino gyno, who you now know about. She's about ready to pack it up and cut her losses, but then the furred blind mouse shows up, an actual mouse named Ralph, and the two actually hit it off and become an actual couple. You could say they complete each other. Yeah, that was kinda cheesy.
Boo! You stink!
Let's move on to episode 6, Brat Brat Pew Pew. a tale written by my broken coffee machine. The episode gets into some wacky bullshit. Diane, venting about her impending abortion, accidentally tweets about it with one of her clients' accounts. Teenage pop star Sextina Aquafina. This episode then goes into the whole abortion issue and who should have the say in it. Spoiler, the woman. She gets a choice. It's her decision. Now shut up.
This episode's premise is so genuinely bonkers, as Sextina constantly talks about her non-existent abortion, writes a hit song about it, has her fake abortion on live TV. It truly doesn't get bonkerser than this. Episode 7 is really unique in terms of its structure, since BoJack is telling a story about something that happened to him to a lady who works for the LA Gazette.
They should have called it the LA Gazelle.
Who's trying to get him to renew his subscription by listening to his story. Said story involves the return of character actress Margot Martindale, where we see what she's been up to, Todd's new business venture, which is basically Uber but with hot sexy killer whales, Anna living a shockingly normal life at her apartment and getting mac and cheese on her shirt, and also BoJack sleeping with Todd's friend Emily. Ruh-roh, skooks. While that last point is the most important aspect of this episode, the thing that always stuck out to me the most is Anna living normally in her apartment. She's always so fierce and intense every other time we see her, but this scene reminds us that she's just a regular person at the end of the day, like all of us, and your idealized image of someone is hardly ever reality.
BoJack's perception of Anna is part of a larger pattern involving how he sees and chooses his partners. BoJack falls for Diane because she listens to him. He falls for Wanda because due to being in a coma for 30 years, she's essentially a 20-year-old in a 50-year-old's body, naive and willing to fall for all BoJack's red flags. People yelled at us last time for not mentioning that, but we had it in the outline for this part. We didn't forget, we just didn't get to it yet. And he falls for Anna because she's powerful and controlling, capable of keeping him out of messes and fixing his mistakes. It's like a souped-up version of his relationship with PC in a way. BoJack wants to get some of that Oedipusy. I hope James doesn't see I wrote that until we record the audio.
What were you saying, William? I was too busy talking about how episode 8 brilliantly subverts those expectations by showing us a marriage counselor telling a certain couple that their relationship is now fixed. Cool, I guess this is the payoff to that scene with her earlier in the season where she was counseling Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter. What the hell? That's not Diane and Mr. Peanut Bobber. Episode 8 focuses on the rivalry between Princess Caroline and her arch nemesis, Vanessa Gecko, plus that Ben Schwartz guy she dated and worked with last season. Those two have teamed up and are trying to get their client a popular movie franchise, which PC is trying to secure for BoJack. BoJack, meanwhile, just wants to make things right with Kelsey and do her movie about lesbians recycling, or jelly beans, or something, I forget. And PC insists that she can get BoJack both. She did not get BoJack both. Truth be told, this episode plot-wise is so dense with so many things going on, so we're not even going to try to talk about it all. The point is that PC royally forks things up for BoJack and her own agency, while Vanessa Gecko and Sonic the Hedgehog get their perfect happy ending. Sonic even says as much at the very end of the episode, right before the vroom back in the 90s. I mean, after all, they're the good guys, right? This really puts things into perspective, because at this point in the show, we know that BoJack and Princess Caroline are kinda bad people who do awful things. Vanessa and Sonic are portrayed as antagonists because they come into conflict with our designated protagonists. But in all honesty, they don't do anything significantly worse than our main characters. It just seems that way at first glance because these are our main characters, who we've followed throughout the entirety of the show thus far.
Objectively, BoJack and PC are kind of worse people. I mean, look at the whole list of things BoJack has done. He is like actually ruined lives, and Princess Caroline backstabbed her assistant before, and also dated free 8-year-olds that one time. What's Vanessa done? Her job? Dewey Duck over here cheated on his wife, yeah, but is that really any worse than how many women BoJack has screwed throughout his life? Figuratively and literally? People are just people. They're not inherently evil like you see in the movies. They just have conflicting goals with our main characters, so we subconsciously root against them. Everyone is the main character of their own story.
All of this leads perfectly into episode 9. Best thing that ever happened. AKA where we got the title for these videos, SMH, all you fake fans who didn't realize that. This is one of my favorite episodes of the season, focusing exclusively on the fallout from the last episode and the tear it tore in BoJack and Princess Caroline's relationship. Okay, cards on the table. I don't really like Princess Caroline that much. Out of the main 5, she's the one character I never really got that invested in the struggles of, because I find her kind of irritating and kind of a bad person. BoJack is a much worse person, but as the main character, we see every single aspect of his life that caused him to turn out the way he did. And PC doesn't really get the same luxury. However, this episode and another one next season are the ones where I really start to understand the profound sense of tragedy and relatability in her character.
While I agree that Princess Cailin is the character I connected the least with out of the core 5, I would argue that this episode is the tipping point, and from this point forward, her character improves drastically as the show goes on, and I care more about a story going forward. So what exactly happens here? BoJack and Princess Cailin go out to dinner at Elefante, with Princess Cailin wanting to patch things up, while BoJack wants to fire her as his agent. Thus begins a night of soul-searching and restaurant mismanagement, because BoJack forgot he owns the place and fucked everything up.
Throughout this episode, we start to remember that throughout BoJack's entire tumultuous career, PC has always been there to support him and pick up the pieces. She could have left at any time, but she stuck it out for this long even though she has nothing to show for it. Everything about the episode points to BoJack realizing her worth and taking her back as his agent at the end. But he says no. Out of every end credits stinger thus far, this one might actually sting the hardest. Did PC deserve to get fired after such a blunder? Probably. But did she deserve it after being one of the only consistent people in BoJack's life? One of the only ones who believed in him and stuck it out despite all the shit she received? Not at all, boy! But on the happy side, this episode sure did remake the entire premise of Ratatouille, just without the rats. Which is ironic, since this is a universe where rats cooking would be seen as perfectly normal, but oh well. Hey William, guess who's gonna talk about Season 3, Episode 10? It's you.
It's me?
No, that's just the name of the episode.
Oh, it's called It's You? Then who's on first?
No, that time I was referring to the fact that it's you who will be discussing It's You.
My name's not you, it's William.
Oh, for the love of...
So episode 10 has the big event, the Oscar nominations. And gosh diddly darn it, guys, BoJack gets the nomination. World peace is achieved, the water tastes like wine, and BoJack is finally happy. Logically, none of that happens. Why would BoJack be happy about something? So to try to become happy, he throws another massive party, reenacts the intro, and then we find out that BoJack actually wasn't nominated for the Oscars. We then flash back to Monsieur Pinot Bonjour preparing the ceremony, but he drops the envelope containing all the nominees in the sewer while chasing his cell phone so he could talk to his brother, Captain Weird Al, who just got out of surgery. So he and Todd have to make up the entire list again by themselves. This is why the Lego movie got snubbed.
While Mr. Pancake Batter and Toad's shenanigans in this extended flashback are a delight, it still really stings that BoJack had this big moment ripped away from him after all this build-up. And you'd think we would have seen this coming, considering how often the show gives us these messy, sad conclusions to their ongoing storylines. But this time, I really thought the sad ending was going to be BoJack getting a nomination or even a win and still feeling empty inside. That's what it seemed like as the episode went along, but no, it's somehow even worse than that. Later on, BoJack has to come clean and confess to Todd that he slept with Emily, which Todd doesn't really take well. He's tired of putting up with BoJack's constant selfish behavior, and he delivers the titular line while giving a great reason you suck speech to BoJack. Basically, he tells BoJack that he needs to stop blaming his shitty actions on the stuff that happened to him in his life, and that the real problem is him. It's pretty cathartic to hear from Todd, honestly, since he's often just a goofy, unintentional enabler for whatever BoJack does. And this rant ends with Todd dropping this season's F-bomb. Honestly, quite unexpected, and maybe not quite as well earned as the ones in the previous season. BoJack's actions here aren't nearly as bad as what happened with Herb and Charlotte, and I guess this is more of an accumulation of all the bad stuff BoJack has done that Todd has been here for. Still, it doesn't quite hold the same weight as the previous F-bombs, and as we'll see in the later seasons, it doesn't stick quite as hard.
I'd argue that was kind of the point though. Todd's F-bomb is less out of outright anger and more from disappointment and exhaustion. Todd is just tired of BoJack. He's over all of his antics and just wants to be done with it. While Herb and Charlotte are cursing him out for the immediate actions he was doing, Todd is doing it after years of abuse. The anger that has been stewing for so long and he just wants out. Everything he could have said has been said before, not just by him, but everyone. He has nothing left to add. It's kind of like the reverse of the previous episode. Todd's giving BoJack what BoJack gave PC last time. It all just happens again, way down the line. Yes, that is an Offspring reference.
Well, now it's time for the dreaded episode 11. Oh lord. This is probably the most important episode of the entire show, given its impact later on. And while it's not quite as perfect as Escape from LA, it's still pretty gut-wrenching. Actually, it's kind of the perfect combination of the previous two episode 11s. It's a crazy drug trip with a downer ending, much like season 1's episode, but it's also an absolute oh god, oh don't do it fest, much like season 2's episode.
BoJack calls up Sarah Lynn, who has been sober for the past 9 months, and asks if she wants to go on a drinking binge. She of course agrees and again some wacky shenanigans like traveling across the country and stalking Penny at college. Hey, wait a minute, that's not funny at all. We find out Sarah Lynn has also been nominated for a music-based Oscar and won, and due to being gone with BoJack for months, is unable to accept it. The two also end up at an AA meeting and tell the crowd about his encounter with Penny last season. The episode ends with Sarah Lynn getting her hands on some of that BoJack drug from earlier in the season, and the two go to the planetarium to fulfill Sarah Lynn's wish of going there. And they lived happily ever after. And by lived, I mean...
There's a lot to dissect with this episode, but I almost dreaded doing so because it's just really heartbreaking and cruel. I mean, intentionally so, the writers did a great job with it. But the fact that BoJack, who we last saw getting roasted by Todd and told that he needs to be better, decided to get his vulnerable, newly sober friend back on drugs and brag about his horrible actions at an AA meeting is just really sick and twisted. But that's BoJack for you. The fact that the brand of heroin that kills Sarah Lynn is the one named after BoJack? Yeah, it checks out. In the next episode, BoJack describes the atmosphere at the funeral and how everyone stood there thinking, well, this was bound to happen, even though it wasn't. Counterpoint, yes, it was. As long as she was around BoJack, the guy who first sent her on a downward spiral by coming to her not as a friend, but as someone who wanted a favor, she was always destined to end up like this. The fact that she was barely in this season prior to this episode, barely in BoJack's life throughout these 9 months of sobriety, just illustrates this point even further. BoJack is toxic, and he needs to realize that and improve before he drags more people down with him. And yeah, Sarah Lynn's last words about wanting to be an architect, a callback to something she said as a kid in a season 1 flashback. Yeah, that one really hurts, Chief.
As was foreshadowed previously, BoJack kills. Now, how do you follow that? As we mentioned, BoJack attends the funeral, but then what? He meets up with Bradley, who played Ethan in Horse and Round, and the two attempt to start their own sequel series of the show, in the vein of something like Fuller House. But BoJack runs off set after talking to a young girl, who reminds him of Sarah Lynn. This attempt at a sequel series and Bradley are never referenced again, so let's move on. BoJack drives off away from Hollywood to escape all his troubles once again, and eventually tries to end it by closing his eyes and flooring his car. He lets go of the wheel and accepts his fate and prepares to die. But he stops himself upon seeing horses running in the distance. That's where BoJack's story for the season ends. A moment of release and reflection. After all he's been through this season, it's a good note to end on, with that nice song playing in the background. But that's not all. We got the rest of the cast we need to talk about, and tie up all the noodly ends. Speaking of noodles!
In case you haven't noticed, while the episode 11s are the big, super serious, dramatic, memorable ones, episode 12s are more so chill setups for the next season, and often not that memorable on their own as individual episodes. This one is the exception, because it includes the most glorious payoff in cinematic history. Even though this is a TV show, not a movie, but that's how great this payoff is. If a book can win a Golden Globe, this can be a cinematic achievement. Shut up. Remember how Mr. Panda Fighter ordered a bunch of spaghetti strainers in the first episode of the season? Well, as the season's gone along, he can't seem to remember what the use is for these things. And there's been other wacky assorted stuff happening. We've been introduced to this underwater city, a secretariat ad BoJack wanted turned out to be a big mirror. Todd has his sexy killer whales Uber app. Character actress Margot Martindale hijacked BoJack's boat from the last season. And the guy who formerly worked at BoJack's restaurant ordered a ship ton of spaghetti. Okay, so you got all that memorized? Good. So guess what happens next? Yep, you got it. Character actress Margot Martindale drives BoJack's boat into the ship with all the spaghetti, causing it to crash everywhere. The mirror ad blimp reflects light onto the spaghetti, which cooks it and sends it hurtling towards Pacific Ocean City. And the only way the city can be saved is if someone has a bunch of spaghetti strainers lying around that can be transported by hot, sexy killer whales who can drive. Is there anyone out there who fits this ridiculously specific set of criteria? You better believe there is. And he's gonna watch a movie for the next 2 hours. Don't call him. I mean, holy shit. This was truly a masterclass in build-up, foreshadowing, writing, genius, etc. Taking all these seemingly innocuous pieces from across the season and stringing them all together, only to have Mr. Peanut Butter turn his cell phone off for 2 hours at the most inopportune time. How do you even come up with something this conceptually fantastic in the writer's room? Honestly, when I'm torn over whether I like season 2 or 3 better, this is the subplot that pushes 3 over the edge. Just wow, truly astounding. Apart from this insane payoff, this episode might have my favorite ending out of any season in the entire show.
Over at Vim, Judah and PC receive a phone call for someone trying to get into contact with BoJack, but Vim no longer represents him. Sounds like normal business matters, but Judah mentions how they sound like a teenage girl. It then cuts to the bedroom of a young horse girl who looks suspiciously like BoJack. As for Mr. Peanut Butter, he gets an unexpected visit from his first wife, Katrina, who asks him if he would like to run for governor. Insert Schwarzenegger joke here. Meanwhile, Todd and Emily are patching things up and discuss how they're gonna use the money they got after selling hot, sexy killer whale Uber. Todd accidentally tips all his money to the waiter cow in a funny Todd antic, and the two discuss their relationship.
After an entire season of Todd constantly dodging having sex with Emily, he finally admits to her that he's not gay or straight. He just might be nothing. Yeah, our boy Toddifer is asexual, but I like how he doesn't actually say that. He doesn't quite know what he is yet, or that there's even a word to describe it, and he won't really discover more about it until later, aka next season. I think it's a nice and pretty realistic moment, and kind of a relatable one, but again, I'll get to that later. All these really intriguing plot threads are tied together with BoJack's journey as this beautiful song plays, Stars by Nina Simone. It's all just hauntingly gorgeous, and it contributes to the most breathtaking season ending the show would ever have. Just watching these horses keep on running and not stop, being overtaken by the magnificence of this sight. It's just a perfect melancholy ending to what, as it turns out, is the first half of the overall narrative of BoJack Horseman.
The first 3 seasons of BoJack take us through the whole Hollywood cycle. It tells one complete story, and if you wanted to put a cap on BoJack's story here, you could. Sure, other characters have some loose ends to tie up next time, but for BoJack himself, you could probably end the show here, and it would probably be a satisfying ending. Season 3 is a worthy follow-up to Season 2. I still mostly prefer 2 to 3, but 3 is still a great season. It does everything you'd really want it to for this setup, has a lot of big character moments, and sets up some big things for Season 4. The only thing we can really knock it for is Diane's role is more subdued here than it was before. She isn't given as much to do here. Notice how we haven't really mentioned her very often this time. What does happen here is important for her character in the future, but for right now? But yeah, Season 3 is great stuff.
Season 3 is an enticing continuation of the overall story, complete with the same compelling drama and witty off-the-wall humor the series is known for. The race for the Oscars is an enticing premise that leads the story in all sorts of interesting directions. The side stories this season are excellent, the character work is fantastic. While it isn't quite as cohesive as Season 2 overall, it makes up for that by having stronger individual episodes that really stick out on their own apart from the overall season. Much like Season 2, this is one of my favorite seasons of television ever, and the last season of the show I'd give a perfect 10 out of 10 score to. With that ominous statement lingering in the air, see you next time for Season 4. Hopefully we get this one out soon, i.e. sometime before June 2021. That sounds realistic, right, William?
F*** you, like, comment, subscribe.
Boxer versus boxer.
Hey, it's me again. Before I depart this realm, I want to ask if you'd be interested in learning valuable skills like how to save an entire ocean civilization from falling spaghetti. Actually, maybe not that specific one, but tons of others. All you have to do is use Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. With topics like illustration, music production, film and video, and much more, you can explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. This is a site that legitimately makes learning new skills fun and easy, since the lessons are broken up into short chunks that you can watch at your own pace. With Skillshare, you can find inspiration in the moment and learn how to express your creativity. Right now, I'm really enjoying Find Your Style, 5 exercises to unlock your creative identity by Andy J. Pizza. I am really jealous of his last name, wow. More importantly, his class is a really interesting and great way to identify different styles and help develop your own as a result. It's really helping me in my own creative pursuits. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, meaning there are no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes, so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. And it's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. Plus, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Click that link before all the spots are gone and enjoy this incredible supply of free knowledge with Skillshare.